la pareja anormal.
Okay. I think we're ready. We should be good.
Yes, we should. Then hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to
Good
LPA.
morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to LPA. My name is Eddie Rivera. Give me a second. With a working computer.
With a working computer, and guys, we had to restart the applause. I'm sorry, mi amor. We had to restart the whole recording because we lost the connection unexpectedly.
They don't know that. They didn't have to know that.
No, but it's a little like if you see me, I'm a little like anxious is because
We're scared. We're scared.
We're scared because we have guests.
It might shut down today, and we do have guests. Today is it's gonna be our last. At least for now, it's gonna be our last recording, separated, distanced. I think we're not gonna stop the Zooms just because I think we'll definitely have more guests, but from there on you'll see us together. Now, on that side of the studio, side of Utah, is Norma Waters. And as I was saying earlier, we have guests. My uncle, he's gonna be. I didn't want to present him as my uncle because he's a retired Army. He worked with intelligence, so I would rather present him like that. That's gonna be very important for today's topic. But who else do we have, mi amor?
We also have, he's going to be joining us here in a few minutes, as Professor Mark Kay. He is he was one of my professors in college years ago. And I mean, we're going to let him kind of present himself as well. But today we're going to be talking about gun control and how it correlates to, these horrible events that have been happening lately. And not just lately. I mean, there's a history of this in the US, in mass shootings and those type of things that unfortunately seem to be on the rise, especially in these weeks. I mean, it has been weeks. And so anyway, let's dive into it. Professor K is ready for us, so
he's waiting. So we're gonna
bring him here and
bring him in.
I'm gonna bring him in.
Here he is.
So here he comes. And looks like he's connecting his audio. And Professor K, if you can hear me, let me know.
Yep, I can hear you.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. And
good.
Professor K, this is Eddie Rivera, because you speak Spanish, so there's no Rivera, it's Rivera. You can pronounce your R's.
Nice to meet you,
Professor. I can see you now. There we go.
Yeah, I can see you. Very intellectual background. I like your work.
Yeah, it's better than my house. So I'm sitting at my house right now, so I figure I'd make it a little more fancy.
It is fancy. So, Professor K, I let you introduce yourself. I already explained that you were my one of my college professors back in when I was in college. But I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, yeah, my name is Mark Kay. I'm a lecturer of Spanish at the University of Nevada, Reno. I'm also an undergraduate advisor there. And I met Norma, man, when was that? That had to have been over a decade ago, right?
No,
Not quite.
not
No,
quite.
maybe 8 years ago.
Probably like 7. Yeah, probably
Okay.
like 7. Yeah,
Yeah, so I met Norma
I'm
when I
very
was,
young, Professor K.
no, I know, that's true. That, well, yeah, um, I think it was, yeah, about 7 years ago when I was actually, um, now you were in my, you were in my humanities course, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
humanities
my
course
introduction
with
to humanities course. Yeah,
Ellen and Giselle, which I'm still friends with, and
right.
we really bonded in that class.
Yeah, that was a great experience. So that was at Salt Lake Community College when I was teaching the introduction to humanities course, and met Norma, and Norma and I have kept touch over the years through social media, but it's really nice to see you and be able to talk to you. It's
Yeah,
been a while. So,
it's
but
been
yeah,
long, I mean, since we took, well, since I took that class and everything. So, Professor K, well, thank you first of all for being here. And um, as I mentioned through when I reached out to you, we just wanted to get your opinion and your insight because you're a very well-educated man, and there's been all this recent mass shootings, and unfortunately they seem to be on the rise. And I've seen through social media, kind of your posts and stuff, and I've seen you're a gun owner yourself.
yeah, that's correct.
So what are your thoughts on that, and obviously the correlation that you see yourself, or I don't know if you have, well, I guess what's your insight or your input?
Hmm. Well, yeah, I may have a bit of a unique insight. I grew up in Utah, and I grew up around guns. Where I grew up, I kind of grew up in the suburbs, but it was kind of on the edge of a lot of farming areas and things like that. So it's kind of interesting. When I grew up, a lot of my friends were big hunters. You know, their parents owned guns. Um, you know, so I just kind of grew up around, you know, with a lot of my friends owning firearms. Like in my family, we never owned firearms, but most of my friends had firearms, were avid hunters and fishers, and that was their culture. And so I was, as a kid, as a teenager, I shot a lot of guns and felt comfortable with them. But obviously, my so politically, I'm pretty left wing politically, and so I'm I think in that sense I'm pretty unique, um, because most of my friends who are gun owners are very right wing politically, support the NRA and all that sort of thing, which is definitely not me. So when I about 10 years ago, I actually purchased my first firearm, which is a pistol, a Colt 45 pistol, but it's a single action replica of like an old Colt 45, kind of the old cowboy gun. And when I bought it, I was like, well, I like historical things like that. I thought this is a cool gun. I can use it for target shooting or when I'm camping and things like that. But it was never, I never bought it thinking, well, I'm gonna use this for anything other than, to go shoot target shooting and things like that. But that made me a gun owner, so I have, I still own my gun, and I do like to go target shooting and things like that, or when I'm camping. And but yeah, so I am kind of unique in the sense that I am not as far to the left as a lot of my friends who, I are calling for very, very, strict gun controls, things like that. However, I'm definitely in the camp of we need reforms. We need gun violence reform. We definitely need, better background checks. There's things like the gun show loophole is ridiculous, right? Where people can purchase these guns secondhand at these gun shows. There's no background checks. That's absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, and dangerous. Also, we see all these mass shootings with these AR style rifles that are semi-automatic, and you can get clips that hold up to 100 rounds in one of these rifles. And these rifles were designed as weapons of war. They're, these are basically modeled at the AR style weapons are modeled after military style like M16s. The only real difference is that they're not fully automatic, but they are semi-automatic. Meaning as quick as you can pull the trigger, it'll fire. So you can imagine if you have a clip with 100 rounds, and also just the way they're designed to kill. They're designed to kill people. They're weapons of war. They're not for hunting. They're not for anything other than that. And so I definitely believe there needs to be regulations. I don't think any citizen needs to have a weapon of war with, semi-automatic rifle with a 100-round clip. I don't really see any justification for that. So I definitely kind of fall somewhere, a little bit in the middle, I guess, when it comes to my thoughts on that as far as gun violence and gun control. So.
Okay. Mark, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Eddie.
First of all, you got to teach me how to do the background, man, because mine is definitely too boring. I'm in a hotel. I got a fire alarm. I wish I could have took that away. But I guess I wanted to kind of pick your brain, because what you just mentioned, I'm sure if something would have been done to the sense of those laws changes, I think that Vegas shooting is a perfect example of that, because that guy, I think he had a couple of those assault rifles, and he just, if they would have watched, if those laws would have been in place, he probably wouldn't have those assault rifles. But I also wanna, because I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think a lot of people that leans way to the left, they don't wanna acknowledge the mental side of it, which is what the right kind of hangs on to is it's all a mind thing. It's the increase in these antidepressant and environmental issue as a country. But I just, I want to pick your brain on that, and kind of tell me, how does that play a factor, and how do you see it as someone that's a Democrat,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question.
And just to mention, before we just to add something, before we even before we even planned this, well, this happened after we planned this. We had the shooting at the FedEx facilities, where, if I'm not mistaken, the suspect was, they were warnings about him to the FBI, correct? They were saying he could have done something like this, and nothing was done. So I just wonder if maybe we would take these accusations seriously, and maybe investigate a little bit more, and kind of add that mental, that those diseases and those threats seriously, if that could affect it as well. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is really shocking. I heard about that mass shooting. That's coming after the shooting in Boulder, Colorado, and the shooting in Atlanta, and kind of felt like there was a little bit of a reprieve from all these mass shootings because of the pandemic, and it kind of feels like we're seeing them, here they come again, right? It's like, oh great, we're back to the weekly,
The old normal.
sometimes the old normal. Yeah. So it's a little disheartening, but yeah. So you mentioned the argument that it's a mental health issue, and I think to a certain degree there's some truth to that. However, I guess the issue I have with that argument is the fact that I don't feel like the only industrialized nation in the world, that has this huge number of mass shootings, much, statistically much higher than in any other industrialized nation in the country, that we're the only people that have mental health issues. If you look at, countries in Europe, if you compare the statistics as far as, mental health and treatment, things like that, they're pretty much right in line with us as the United States. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, if you look at the numbers, we don't suffer more mental illness than any of these other industrialized nations. Yet we have gun violence numbers, 10 times in some instances or more than these countries. Then that argument kind of loses some weight to me. And I have to ask myself, well, there has to be more going on, right? Because how do you explain those differences? And so that's when I have that problem with, well, it's a mental health issue. Now, of course, I think there is, like I said, there is some truth to that. And perhaps, access to, proper treatment with mental health issues, you could argue is not as accessible in the United States with our medical system. A lot of people are uninsured, can't afford to get counseling, can't afford to go to the doctor. Whereas you see in these other countries, more forms of socialized medicine where everybody has access to healthcare and mental health care. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I really do believe that at the core, what's happening is the number that really sticks out to me is just the vast amount of firearms that exist in our culture. We have, I believe we have about 4% of the world's population in the United States, but we own over 40% of the world's guns. That's, around there, right? So I just feel like we have a culture that's so saturated in guns that when you have people who obviously are suffering from some sort of mental illness or whatever it may be, they may have easy access to a firearm or one of these rifles, these semi-automatic rifles. I was reading about the shooting in Indianapolis, and this, I believe, was an 18-year-old guy or 19-year-old guy, a young guy, who was distraught. He was a former employee of UPS, from what I've read, and obviously he had issues. He committed that mass shooting and then killed himself. But what would that have been different if he did not have access to that weapon? I think so. I think that's a valid argument, right? And so I just think it's an issue of just such easy accessibility to these weapons. A lot of the background checks, for example, the shooter in Boulder, purchased a firearm, I believe it was just days or a day before his shooting, if I'm not mistaken, because it was so easy to, he didn't have a criminal record. He passed the background check, but he got it right away. I feel like there should be a waiting period. I think there needs to be much more in the way of background checks and things like that. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I really think, talk about mental health, yes, we can talk about mental health, but in so many ways I feel like it's a distraction from the elephant in the room, which is that we just have so many guns in our culture, in our country, that are easily accessible to people who they probably shouldn't be, who are either suffering from mental illness or have bad intent, and that's not even mentioning just the sheer number of suicide deaths by firearms here that's it. That's an epidemic happening. There's so many shooting deaths, suicides, excuse me, with firearms. Again, if you could probably argue that a lot of these people who are killing themselves with firearms, if they didn't have that gun, which is so easy to kill yourself with that gun, if they didn't have that available, maybe they would still be alive. Maybe they would have, you know, who knows, tried to take pills or something else, or reached out, you know, but just in that moment, they just pull the trigger and it's over, and that person's lost. So you know, there's a lot of issues, but that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, no, and what about, because one thing that sets us apart, you know, in the United States is it's kind of by diversity. That's why we're the country we are, I think. It's because we kind of accept, you know, and I'll put that in quotes, uh, every race into the country, and that's something, because when I'm thinking about it, I think of my country. I'm from Puerto Rico, which is, you know, it's part of the United States, but it's not a state. So, you know, we're on our own country, and this kind of thing doesn't happen. You know, I'm not saying you don't have violence and you don't have shootings, but you don't have our own people going into classrooms, going into and just killing our own people for no reason. And I think that's the same case in Mexico. I believe, you know, obviously there's a lot of violence within their own people, and you know, but that's more cartels. That's more of corruption, and corruption would be the main thing. But do you think that plays a part in where this is a very divided country? You know, you got Fox, CNN, and they you know, if you want to, you can get so isolated within those same networks, and those mentalities and views. And I think if you focus on it, and you are one of those people that kind of focus on one side, you can definitely start creating this hate and this bad view for this other side. Am I somewhere in the ballpark? Do you think that maybe has a little something to do with that as well?
I definitely do. I feel that you know, I think you make a great point about how divided we are as a country, you know, politically, ideology, and it's interesting because if you mentioned Fox News, and if you look at right-wing media, the narrative is that you know, Democrats and the government, they want to take your guns away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this has been the argument for years and years. This happened for 8 years under Obama. It's happening now under President Biden. But that's the narrative, and you know, that's really being pushed very strongly by groups like the NRA, which you know, really, you look at the NRA, and it's so much basically just a lobby group for gun manufacturers. It's, you know, their interest is so obviously invested in
Profit.
you know, profit. Yeah, thank you, Norma. Profit. You know, but they're also part of that narrative. So they're pushing, you know, that you know, the government's going to take your guns away. And so what we see happening is, I just read recently that there's been a record number of gun sales recently, as we've changed administration with the Democratic President Biden. Gun sales have just jumped, and you know, I have a lot of friends who are right wing leaning people, and I'm already hearing that narrative. Oh, they're going to take our guns. You know, they're posting memes about, you know, how are we going to what's going to happen if we have an oppressive government. You know, an oppressive government can't ever take over its citizens who are well armed, and all these sorts of narratives. And that's kind of driven by on the left. You do hear kind of more on the extreme left some rhetoric about, you know, very, very strict gun control laws. You know, a lot of rhetoric that, you know, maybe we need to you do something like they did in places like Australia, where they had a mass shooting and they basically like just started banning the guns. I believe it was Australia. And so there's kind of these polar opposites, right? Where on the left you have people who are calling for very extreme gun control measures, and then on the right, people who are very afraid that the government's going to take their guns away, and it's kind of like this vicious cycle. And I also feel that, like I said, politically, I'm very left-leaning, and I'm a Democrat, but I have a lot of, I grew up in a very conservative culture. I have a lot of very conservative friends, and I think that a lot of people on the left don't understand that there are a lot of people, conservative people on the right who are good people, law-abiding people, and they grew up around guns. They love to go hunting, they collect guns, and they're very responsible with their guns. But I think a lot of people on the left are, I would argue that the majority of them aren't gun owners and, don't really, never grew up around guns. They may be very fearful of guns. And so you really don't have much dialogue going on in the middle, right? So,
yeah.
And again, I think it's kind of that self-perpetuating cycle where the left is like, we got to do something about guns. And the right's like, they're going to take our guns. And then they buy more guns, and then more guns get into our community. And one last thing I'll say real quickly, a big problem is that, even when law-abiding citizens buy guns, I was reading recently, what happens is a lot of times guns are stolen from these people. These people maybe live in the suburbs or whatever, but they'll get stolen and they end up, in the city or with gangs and things like that, because there's just so many, right? So a lot of times these guns, even if they are purchased by law-abiding citizens, they can be stolen and end up in the wrong hands. So anyhow, like you said, it's a difficult thing because I don't think there's much dialogue going on in the middle at all about gun violence in this country. So.
No, I agree. And yeah, I'll let Norma. She's been a little too quiet. I don't know if she wants to ask something.
No, I have a lot of things. I've been like, my brain is,
Yeah.
you know how I am.
I'll let you go.
So, I'm a big, I guess I like to focus on the solution with always taking the root of the cause in mind, because I think if we just we just start passing this, laws or what have you, without really understanding what the root cause of the issue is in the first place, then we're just bound to repeat the same thing at different proportions, maybe later, 50 years down the road, who knows. But this has been my argument, or my thought, at least for as long as I can remember. If I'm, the right to bear arms is protected by the Second Amendment. Okay, so I understand that culturally, that is a big part of the identity of the United States. It's part, I think that has a lot to do with it. A lot of people here take pride in that. It's the United States, the militia, we came together, we fought England and these other nations, and we became independent. So we did this by what? Being together, organizing ourselves. Again, I understand that gives people that pride, and they don't want to lose that. So I guess I see a part of why they feel like their part of their identity will be threatened if they take their guns, or have some type of or have their Second Amendment modified or regulated. What I don't understand is the Second Amendment and this protection came over 200 years ago, when in fact there were, there was the country, was war, and there were all kinds of threats to the independence and to the territory already gained. So obviously that was the way they sought to defend themselves over 200 years ago. What are we defending ourselves from now? Especially as the United States, as an industrialized nation that we are, with, great scientific advancements, with great technology, and, in art. And we can go on about all the great things that this country offers. So what are we defending ourselves from?
I
To
hate
me, it
that
seems
argument.
like,
I hate that argument because and that's part of the argument that they say, oh, well, if we want to create our own, overthrow the government, how are we supposed to do that if we don't have guns? But then the government is the military, and the military, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I just read it on the internet that the military is funded like $754 billion. That's not an argument, in my opinion. That's just not an argument anymore. If you cannot throw this government if you joined all the civilians, unless you have the military behind you, and at that point you already have the government behind you. The
well,
military
that's what I'm saying.
government.
So
That's
what
all.
are we defending ourselves
I
from?
hate it. I hate it.
It seems like we're defending ourselves from our own selves.
Yeah.
Because if let's just say Iran or Russia, they were to attack, like, let's just put it out there, let's go crazy, let's go far. Those type of guns that you have, like you're saying, Professor K, this semi automatic guns and whatever, they're not gonna do much if those other countries were decided to all of a sudden
Right.
attack the US. So basically, all you're hurting is your community, your peers, your own country. That's what I don't understand when they say, well, where are we defending ourselves? Back in the day,
Right.
200 years ago, that may have been a thing, I get it, but now.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with both of you. It is pretty ridiculous to think that, okay, you have a semi-automatic rifle, and that's going to defend you against tanks and jets and aircraft carriers. And
Yeah,
it's a ridiculous argument. I agree with both of you on that. Going back to Norma's point, what are we defending ourselves against? Well, my thoughts on that is, if you look at the history of the United States, who owned the guns initially? It was white people. It was the white settlers. It was the European settlers. What were they using the guns for? Well, in many senses, they were using the guns in the South as a way to maintain the institution of slavery. As white European settlers moved westward, they used their guns to exterminate the indigenous people, the Native Americans, forcibly relocate them off of their lands. Once they made it down, to the Southwest, what happened? Well, we have what we call the Mexican-American War, but really was basically, Anglo, settlers, American settlers, who wanted Texas, who wanted, this area where I'm at now in Nevada. It was all part of Mexico right before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. But they basically just attacked. They said, we want this. And who are they fighting? The Mexicans. Okay. And so at least in my estimation, there's a deep historical issue here, and that is it goes back to the larger issue in our country of the dominant culture, right? Which are white people essentially, being fearful of minorities in so many ways, right? Because of that legacy of not only slavery that we had, but that legacy of essentially genocide against the indigenous people here. And so there's this narrative, and you hear it a lot on the right, it's kind of this implicit or sometimes in some ways explicit, bias or racism. There's a fear. There's a fear amongst a lot of white Americans, and and I really believe that they feel like, oh, I got to defend myself. And I think this argument about, oh, it's against an oppressive government, that may be part of it, but at the same time, there's this deeper historical and psychological issues going on with them that, they're fearful of the other, they're fearful of minorities, and that may be an implicit belief, but I think it's really built on fear and amongst, a lot of white Americans, because again, you look at the numbers, it's predominantly white Americans that own the guns, right? And you look at these gun rallies, just, all you gotta do is take a look. It's almost exclusively white people, predominantly white men, at these like marches and NRA events and stuff like that, women too, but predominantly white. So I think we cannot dismiss the historical, the legacy of historical racism and institutionalized racism, and it's still here today. I think that's still a huge part of it.
Yeah, and I think that also gets reflected with this police shootings. I just heard the news of this 13-year-old boy that was shot in the chest, and he was, in my opinion, he did have a gun that he obviously dropped before he was shot. But if that fear wasn't there, I think those extra couple seconds that officer didn't take to process that time, he wouldn't have been shot, and he would have noticed that, oh, he was just putting his guns away. I'm putting his hands up and dispose of the gun, and it just happens over and over and over where that fear is there. But I don't know if Norma has anything else, but I do want to, because I do love this argument. I love the argument that says if you want to get in a car, you have to get a license, you have to go through a driving test, and you have to let a professional examine you and test you and make sure that before you get into that car, you're ready. And she has a big part, or him, they have a big part in that, because I just remember I failed my first driving test because it wasn't the fact that I didn't know how to drive. It was just that I wasn't mentally prepared. I got nervous, and she could see that nervousness behind the wheel. And I didn't get the license. I couldn't park properly. So she could tell, and she was ready. And then later on, I kind of got used to driving a little bit more and a little bit more. And then the next time I took the test, that nervousness went away. I was comfortable behind the wheel, and I got the car. And I would like that process to be put in to where you have a license provided by a professional gunsman, and that can examine you mentally and also your physical way of managing guns and all that before you get allowed to that. And not only that, but also hold people accountable, because I think that if you do that argument, the right is always going to go with, oh, well, yeah, but that kid can just go into a closet, pick up a gun, or pick up the dad's gun that got the guns with licenses, or and then he can perform the same actions. But if you keep people accountable and you let them know, hey, this is your gun, and whatever happens with this gun, you're gonna be partly responsible. But what if we say, Mark, hey Mark, it's on you, man. How can fix this for us? Like, how would you go about trying to reduce these shootings? I mean, it's getting bad.
Right. Well, I think, yeah, and I think you make a great point about just to operate a motor vehicle, you have to take classes, you have to do a driving test, you have to do a written test. As you mentioned, you failed the first time because you were intimidated and you were inexperienced and you needed more practice and had to go back and redo it. But yet, to obtain a firearm, in many ways, it kind of varies from state to state. But for example, when I bought my my pistol, I bought it in Utah, and so I saw it. I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna buy this pistol. This would be cool to target shoot and things like that when I go camping. So I'm like, I told the guy, I was like, okay, I'm gonna, I think I'll get this right here. And he's like, okay, great. And literally, so I gave him my driver's license. He ran it through the computer. He's like, oh, this will be about half an hour. He's like, if you want to look around some more. And I was like, okay, cool. So I kind of looked around. It was about a half hour later. And then I come back and he's like, all right, well, background checked out. You look good. Nothing came up. Like, all right. And it was less than an hour that I walked out of that store with my pistol. And even I was shocked. I thought there'd be a waiting period. I thought I might have to get some references. That was the first firearm I had personally purchased. So I was shocked. I walked out of there less than an hour with the gun, the pistol. And so, we definitely, and Norma made a great point. Norma made a great point about the Second Amendment, that not only was this drafted during a time, as she mentioned, of war, with England, but at the same time, if you look at the firearms of the late 1700s, they were muskets. They were single shot, cap and ball muskets. You literally, they didn't have cartridges back then. You literally had the balls, the lead balls, and the gunpowder, and you'd have to pack it. It could take several minutes between each shot on one of these muskets. Okay, this is nothing compared to a semi-automatic rifle of today. So I think it's reasonable to say that yes, we do value, and as you said, Eddie, we have a history of valuing our right to bear arms. Yes, we can protect that, but at the same time, we have to use some common sense, right? And as you said, why is it taking away anyone's rights if we say, okay, you need this extensive background check, you need to get 3 references, there's a waiting period, sometimes they call it a cool down period, so people like this guy in Boulder couldn't be, whatever was going on in his mind and go get one and go kill people. He's gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to wait a week or 2 weeks, whatever, while there's extensive background checks, references done. Even like you said, perhaps, maybe before you can purchase it, you need to show that some kind of proficiency with it. I know for like concealed carry permits, you have to go through a course and where they teach you about the gun. You have to show proficiency. You have to learn all the safety measures. I don't think that's unreasonable, in my opinion, to ask that of our citizens before purchasing a gun. I don't think that's going to keep guns out of the hands of any of the quote unquote good guys. That's always the argument, right? Well, if you keep the guns out of the hands of the good guys, this is what I hear, who's going to defend us against the bad guys? Well, if you're a good guy, you should be willing, go through that process. But it's just, anyhow, it's just way, way too easy to acquire a firearm, even legally in this country. And there's just so many of them. I think that's a huge problem. So
I think, yeah. And it's great that you make that observation about the how a gun from over 200 years ago in comparison to one now, and it's not the ones that are being used. So just I think right there we can, and there's so much more to it, but just like you said at the beginning, why would anyone need that type of rifle, that type of yeah, I mean that type of gun in their possession. And from what I hear, I was reading also this one. I don't know if you guys have read about it or heard about it. This case in Texas where two brothers kill their parents, the sister, and then they kill themselves. They were both known to be treated for anxiety. They were both on medication and they suffer from depression. And one of them said, it was one of them who went and bought the guns, and then the other one said it was so easy to get a gun. They just asked us a few questions. They asked us if we had any mental issues, and we lied and said no. And they also asked if we had any if we were on any medications, or if the brother was on any medications, and he said no, and he lied because he was on medications. And just as easy as that, and I think it was like $380 or something like that. So we're also talking about something that is very affordable. I mean, $380, it's not like, I get it, it's not $25 either. But if you think about the amount of damage and the amount of it's just damage that can be caused by that, the price of it is just so cheap. Everything from the price to the access, just like you said, that you just gave your driver's license and off you go. Everything is just so easy and so accessible, where you say, well, where do you mental health treatment can only do so much and will only do so much. As long as the other stuff is so accessible, that's going to continue to happen, because that's only mental health treatment is only going to cover some part. And just like these brothers did, they lied. You can lie about it and off you go. Like, the first, or at least one of the obstacles, you lied your way around it, then off to the next one, and then the next one was getting the access of the gun, and it's history from there. So I don't think right now that we can still be living and addressing the same issue in the same way that it was over 200 years ago. There's definitely some type of reform, and I don't know, I mean, I don't own any type of guns, and I don't think anyone in my family does. I don't think we're big on that, like as far as that culture, just like I said, unless it's cartel corruption related. We are not as a Mexican, we are not, it's not really part of our culture. But there's got to be some type of reform. I understand that a lot of people do like to have their guns, and they would like to have more regulations and still be able to own their guns. And I think that's perfectly fine. But there's got to be a point where you say, okay, are we really continue down this road? Like, when is enough?
Well, also, Norma, just real quickly, I want to mention something. You mentioned, your family being from Mexico. Well, this issue in the United States is not just in the United States, because one thing that is happening as well, there are so many guns in the United States, and they're so easily accessible, especially these military style semi-automatic rifles, that those cartels in Mexico, where do you think they get their guns? They're being smuggled south. This is affecting Mexico. All that violence and all of that, the murders and the killing, almost all those guns have come from the United States. That, they'll move drugs up north to us, and then we traffic all these firearms, because there's so many. We have literally millions and millions of firearms, more firearms per capita than any country in the world. And those all get funneled down into Mexico. And who's using them? Well, these cartel members, and look at the death rates. It's horrible. So it's affecting.
That's a perfect segue into what I was going to ask you, Mark. I was going to ask, what about the a lot of people mention registering the guns, and the right, they hate that, but I think our register process, at least with vehicles, is it's gotten to a point. I mean, you never see a car just abandoned anywhere, or a car not accounted for. And obviously those things are way bigger. But what do you think on that on a national level, to where we have to register them and keep a track of these guns? That way that doesn't happen, to where they end up killing innocent people in Mexico, and even further south than that. I think all those cartels, they definitely go past Mexico.
Mhm. Well, yeah. So and that's a great point you bring up, and this is a very controversial issue, is this idea of a gun registry, right? I personally am totally for something like this. I think we need to track the guns. I think there needs to be accountability. You know, because there's just so many guns, we don't really know where they're at. We don't know whose hands they end up into. But yeah, they need to be regulated, in my opinion, and registered, so we can better track them. Now, when I say that, I'm sure someone listening on the right wing they're not going to be happy hearing that, because that's kind of the argument I hear on the right, is like, we can't register these guns, especially a national registry, because the government will come take them away. We don't want the government to know we have them, because we don't trust the government. And then what happens if we get this oppressive government, this whole fantasy scenario that we're back to, and they're going to come take all our guns. They're going to know exactly what home to go to because it's on the registry, and they take our guns. And that's the argument you're going to hear. And it goes to this deep mistrust on the right of government, of any kind of regulation, mixed in with this idea of, again, which in my opinion is a fantasy of, like, we're going to defend ourselves against an oppressive government. So I think that's why we don't see that happening. There's so much resistance on the right to any kind of national registry because of fear of the government.
Definitely.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
What will
And I
happen
think
with that.
I have to add this, because I seen the news about the NRA, and just so you guys know, I don't think I obviously lean to the left, but I don't think I'm in the extreme left. But I did hear news of the NRA using their funds to go on vacation, and by get themselves richer. Uh, but yeah, I think that's a big part. Yeah, I think the NRA is definitely a big part into that fear.
Oh,
But
definitely. And yeah, and like you said, they're having all these scandals, these financial issues, with the leaders enriching themselves, as you mentioned, inappropriately using all this money. But to me, it's not surprising at all, because the NRA has morphed. I mean, the NRA is a historic institution that 50 years ago, literally was just, kind of a pro-gun safety type organization. For hunters, they would offer, training and things like that. And it's morphed into this, like, it's nothing like it used to be. It's morphed into this extremely political, extremely right-wing organization that really, and again, like you mentioned, all these revelations have shown that their real purpose is profit, as Norma said. They're basically lobbyists for the gun manufacturers and those who make money off of that. They have no interest in public safety. They have no interest in even the Second Amendment. They could care less. As long as they're selling guns, they don't care where they go. I'm sorry, but that's the absolute truth about that organization. They have one purpose: is to get rich off of selling more guns, and that's it. That's my opinion of the NRA.
And and it's funny because last year, right as we were heading into COVID, when shutdowns were cases, were on the rise. The beginning of last year, March and February. I remember, and I think I told this to Eddie, Memor. I think I remember telling you this, but one coworker, she came and said, I overheard this conversation where she was saying that um her husband was into hunting, And you know, here in Utah, that's a big part here, and it's a big part of the culture here. And she said that he had gone to, I don't remember exactly which sports, could have been Cabela's, I could be wrong, but she was saying how they were completely out of everything for hunting. And she was saying that to another coworker who said, I'm also big into hunting. And he said, I was actually just thinking, well, if we shut down, maybe this is a good time to, you know, be isolated and kind of go hunt and everything. And he said, that's funny because the same thing happened to me and my brother. We just went to some other place and it was the same thing. Everything was completely out. So that just tells you when there was some part of fear, automatically people turn into guns, defend ourselves. And this was like a pandemic that had nothing to do with any,
Right.
but that, like you were saying earlier, that just shows where that culture, how the thought process and the history behind it of wherever it is, there's some type of, you know, the government is plotting something, or you know, we just don't trust the government. We don't know if this is being something that they're making up, so let's just defend ourselves because that's what we have to do, and whatever we can have access to, we're gonna have access to. And I just thought like it was a little, I was a little bit in shock because I mean, we were talking about a pandemic and people are going to get their guns and all these things. And it's just, again, it's just a power. It's just a matter of power. And and it's just an illusion because just like we've said, that is not going to defend you if the government decides to turn around this. We're not really going to be able to defend ourselves with any type of those things. At the same time, we don't want to, or you know, people don't want to register the guns for lack of accountability. Just like Eddie was saying, you know, we keep getting away with it. It's fine. There doesn't have to be a reform because as long as I can own it, then I mean, how many? I'm sure there's been a lot of cases where homicides have happened, and because their gun was never registered, and you know, if had it been a some type of registry for the gun or something, you know, clues, or you know, there could be some type of leads to make the people responsible for whatever crime pay and be, you know, hold them accountable, but none of that. I mean, it's just, it seems to me like, why are we debating some of the basic things? Some of the very basic things, you know, there's more complex, you know, when we get to mental health, that's a more complex issue. That's a more, you know, there's medical care comes into play. A lot of people don't have access to that and it's not very affordable. Also, you can debate the efficiency, you know, again, those are more complex discussions, but some of these ones are, to me, seem just like so basic that
Right.
it's 2021. Why are we still operating and, you know, handling this manner in the way that it was so many years ago?
But Norma, I think you make a great point about how when this pandemic happened, gun sales just went off the charts, right? And there's a gun shortage, there's an ammunition shortage. But what you said is I think is key to the discussion, is that it's fear-based. Like you said, it's ridiculous. How is a gun? Are you going to shoot the virus? Are you going to shoot coronavirus?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Right. But it's that fear. It's that fear, and I think we really have to talk about that fear in the hearts of so many Americans for whatever it may be. And like I said before, I'll go back to the argument that, you know, it goes back to the legacy of our country, of, you know, these white Europeans who were, you know, fearful of the slaves because they, you know, fearful of the indigenous people, fearful of the Mexicans. You know, that may sound radical to some people, but there's this fear, and that we cannot discuss this without discussing that fear and where that fear comes from. That's my opinion, I think.
Yeah.
But anyhow, yeah.
Well, Mark, you're awesome, man. And I appreciate your input and all this. And just to kind of give you an idea, because you didn't hear before you came in, we spoke about having my uncle. He's a retired. He worked in intelligence for the Army, and he did 30 years of service. And we're about to have him on. And he doesn't like you, man. I'll be really honest. He don't like Democrats one bit. So I just wanted to get, obviously I don't want to just have one side of the story. I want to speak with both sides and kind of have it on. But I don't know if Norma has anything else.
No, none on my end. Just thank you for your time. It was a great discussion. I'm looking at the time. It's an hour, and I'm like, that went fast. That went fast. It was very informative. Again, looking at, obviously we're looking at different things, and we're gonna bring, Tio Jorge on really soon, and we're gonna hear the other side, because again, we can't just be, I think that's part of the also the issue, that we're just willing to hear what we want to hear.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, Eddie and Norma, yeah, thank you for setting this up. I think it's a great thing you're doing. And it's great that you're creating this platform for actual honest discussion about this issue, which again, so thank you so much. And I look forward to, hearing the other side later on.
Oh yeah. And one last thing before we go. Norma, was she a good student or what?
She was an amazing student. She was one of the best students I've had. I'm sure that shouldn't surprise you, right, Eddie? Very studious, highly intelligent, respectful, amazing student, model student, A student.
Okay.
Couldn't have a better student than Norma.
All right. She's hard to teach sometimes, man. That's why
that's true.
How dare you.
But that's what I liked about her. Again, she questioned everything in my class. She was always questioning. She never accepts anything on the surface. And I think that's great.
Cool. Man, I look forward to speaking to you. I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, thank you, Professor K. Professor K. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I know we said goodbyes, but I did want to ask you this. You obviously are a professor. You work with young students.
Right.
A lot of these, tragedies have been perpetuated by young people that you're like, why? They had this, whole life ahead of them. What is there something? And obviously you talk about humanities, and let's be honest, unfortunately, that's something that it's not so popular, unfortunately, in our culture, which I think we need more of. Anything, because I'll be honest, just as much as you said I was a good student, I did not want to take your class. I did it just to get the credit off and continue to my major, which obviously was a turning point, because had I not been taking your class, it just opened my head and my brain, and it's like a completely different thing. But is there anything that you would like, I guess, a message for the youth, for those who are coming, I guess?
Right. Well, to get a little philosophical for 1 minute before I take off, I really think it comes down to, and this is something that I really love that the comedian Bill Hicks said, who passed away, unfortunately, but he said, I think in the early 90s, he did this famous routine. He said, we have all this violence, we have all this killing. And he said, really, there's a solution, and it's such a simple solution. And the solution is that we need to choose love over hate. We need to choose love over fear. So I really think it comes down to, because like I said, it's so much based in our fear. And I think we as Americans, and I hope younger people understand this, is that, instead of embracing that fear, embrace love. Don't buy more guns. Don't put more locks on your doors. Don't be afraid of people who are different than you. Embrace people who are different from you. You don't have to go get the guns. Talk to more people. If you're afraid of, if you're afraid of somebody that maybe, like the Black Lives Matter movement. I know a lot of people are against that. Well, go talk to people. Go to one of those places and talk to the people, and you're going to realize they're people just like you. They're people just like you. And I think that is the thing I would say to young people and everybody is, it's just a simple choice. You got to choose love over fear, and ultimately, I think that's the only way we're going to get out of this problem.
I agree.
We got to drop the fear. We got to get past that fear. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the time. I know that wasn't the last question, but I was just like, oh, I gotta get it in.
Yeah, thank you, Norma. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, man. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.
I'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, so that was Professor K. Again, that went fast.
Oh yeah.
I have to split this, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, mi amor? Do we have Tio Jorge joining?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm right there with him, but I lean a little bit to the left, so I think I'll put my thoughts when we bring the other side, which is kind of with the ones I disagree with the most, and we'll go over this. I think I just obviously I agree with a lot of the things he said, with most of the things he said. So, but let me let's get my uncle, and just in case I gotta cut him in later, here's the call with my uncle Jorge. Okay, now, all right, can we can we what are your thoughts, mi amor?
Well, I'll just while you manage that and bring him into the call. Yeah, just like he said, and like you said, I agree with a lot of those things. And by the way, guys, just like I said, I didn't bring him in, or we didn't. I suggested this to Eddie. And by the way, unfortunately, we had thought about this topic even before some of these shootings happened, and it looks like Tio Jorge is ready, so we're gonna bring him in, and then we're gonna.
Hey, I'm gonna use the bathroom. Just talk to him, introduce him, and all that. It's my uncle. Yeah. Go.
Okay, so we're bringing Jorge Guzman into our call today. And as Eddie already said, he's his uncle, and I'm gonna let him introduce himself and give you all guys your credentials. Tio Jorge, buenos días. Good morning.
Yeah. I'm gonna get my camera here working.
Okay. Take your time. We lost the connection. Right. The first time.
But luckily, it was right at the beginning.
Yes, it was right at the beginning. We had to
I don't know what I'm doing mixing. I don't know what I'm doing mixing water with coffee. That's a bad combination.
Yeah, that's why I'm not
had
drinking
to
anything today.
leave my valves real quick. Okay. Theo, how are you?
How you doing? Good.
Man,
Okay.
I'm ready for this trip to Colorado. I'm ready to see you guys and the whole family, and
we're so ready.
On the long term, I'm ready to be closer with you guys, hopefully too. So
Us too. It's a good time to do that. Weather's a little bit changing right now up there, as you can see. Highs and then the lows, even with snow. So hopefully by the time we get there, things are settled with the weather.
yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. So just to kind of give you a little background, we've been going at this for about an hour.
That went fast.
Yeah, we brought in Professor Mark K. He's got a lot of our viewpoints. He's a Democrat. He's on the left, and like I told Norma, I was like, you know what? We have to bring the other side. I know we did a podcast together, and you said you don't like Democrats, but I think we can find some points where we all agree.
Exactly.
But our
So
topic.
you don't like the Democratic agenda.
Gotcha. And what we were talking about obviously is gun control, before we planned this, or after we planned this, we recently just had this shooting at the FedEx facility where 8 people died. Very sad about it. There were, like I said before, there were already calls to the FBI about his mental state, and they were warnings about him doing something similar to doing exactly what he did. So, but I just wanted to get your take on the whole gun control issue, and where are you at? And definitely introduce yourself. You know, you were in the Army and all that. But
Okay.
I'll let you get at it.
Okay. My name is Jorge Guzman. I'm a 32-year-old veteran from the Army. Retired about 3.5 years ago. Live in Florida, originally from Puerto Rico, born in New York, and came in the first time in 1979. So I'm an 80s guy, very happy guy, and still are, and I love my life and my family. I'm enjoying retirement right now, and so just came back from Puerto Rico.
I saw those.
It was awesome. There's some violence too with the drugs and guns out there, some killings and bad things as well. Poverty, things like that. So gun control. And for me, gun control, my definition of gun control is all the, obviously the legislation that our government is trying to do to control gun violence. Gun violence is the issue, not gun control. Gun violence. And it's the gun in the hands of an unstable person or a person, anybody, just kind of crack down and gets mad, it's been bullied or whatever, and decides to use the gun, express themselves. For me, it's like a gun violence right now is like a virus, like an epidemic. It just keeps growing on. People see it on TV. There's movies. There's excitement. There's this, and they just keep doing it because it's okay for them. Because you did it, I did it, so they do it too. And for me, the issue at the political level gets into how do we stop this issue, this epidemic. Is very hard, and we're trying obviously through legislation. And so now you had the two bands, Democrats and Republicans. Obviously, they're going to be on one side the other one, and then in between you got something called the Constitution of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You have the right to bear arms. It just don't even go there. It ain't going to change. That's the way it is. That's the way the United States was formed. It'll be there forever. And then you hear all this rhetoric and people talking, we're going to do this, more background checks, things like that, or the procedures. I agree 100% in that type of gun control legislation that do the most you can to verify whether this person or not should possess a gun. But that's very hard to do because now you're putting all that that burden goes on the establishment. It's just like a guy, me and you show up to buy something, you're okay, so I'll sell you the gun. And they talk about databases that I can pull, but still the burden, you're putting the burden on the establishments. And that's hard because they don't have the money to invest in an infrastructure of databases and computers. That needs to be the state. That's where the power is, the state. But then in the political arena, it's always the same issue, the fight between the state and the federal government or the union. It boils down to the same thing that we always seen in my life, is the state always wants the money from the union, but let me handle the issues myself, but you give me the money. And the union says, no, you need to fix your problem. Hey, this is gun control is nothing more, same thing as, it just touches us more close to me, like the safe cities It's the issue, the battle between the state and the union. It becomes political. The border issues that we have, the drug issues that we have, it's all the same thing. And it's not the same thing. It has a different origin, different root cause. But when it gets to their politics, it's just the same. You hear all this talking and things like that. And you can put so many band-aids to the problem, but none of those things are addressing the root cause. None of them. They're avoided because it's hard to do it. And then once in a while, you get somebody who's crazy enough to mention, I'm going to put a border to control the illegal immigration of immigrants. And that just goes crazy. And it's the wrong thing to do, but at the same time, it's the right thing to think about it. It's just how do you do that? The answer is not a border. The answer is, the problem is I need to control my immigrants, my illegal immigrants, because it's bringing all these things, or different legislation that helps me control that. So gun control is nothing more than another one of those secondary, tertiary effects of our society where we at. And it's really having a bad thing to our society right now. It's very hard to go into a place without thinking. Looking to my right or my left, there's going to be a crazy guy shooting over here just because that's the only way they can express themselves. That's what they think. I'm not saying that. And they want to hurt somebody else. And then you mix that a little with racism and some of the old issues that we have, and it just becomes bad blood, you know. And it's a little bit all over the world, but the United States is obviously where we see that stuff. And,
so where are you at? Because I asked Mark, where are you at with the whole registering? Because you said you're okay with putting those rules in place, and you're okay with that. So I think we can definitely meet in the middle somewhere. So where are you with registering guns and keeping a track on them? And
I don't have a gun, but I don't have an issue having a register to register guns. However, you got to be really careful because the Constitution says you have the right to bear arms. It doesn't say right to register your weapon. Now you got a battle. You got a legal battle there. You cannot force people, but they can establish legislation and make that happen if they want to. It's that simple. But the power is with the state. The state this is called the United States of America. It's the state that has the power. You know, it's not the union or the federal government. Everybody wants them because all they want is, for me, is, and this is my thinking, is the money. This is going to come with money. No. So the states can unilaterally say, hey, we need to establish gun controls in accordance with the union and to help our citizens, and we're going to do it. That's where the power is.
So what you're saying is that on a federal level, there's not really nothing they can do. They can because it's all going to be up to the state.
Yeah. The only problem is politics. They can do it if you have somebody gutsy enough. Who did that last time? You know, one of the ex-presidents. And the new one started the first day doing the same thing. But this creates division because you're not working with Congress, you know, and that's what happens. The two parties, one likes to work, the other one doesn't like to work. I'm going to use my pen because one of the powers. You don't want that type of president that we already had twice in the last 10 years. I don't care how good and beautiful it looks on TV. That's a wrong thing to do. So they ought to work together. And so if you have for me, if you had grabbed the biggest states, New York, right? California, which one is the other one bigger in Chicago because of the people, and Florida, right? And some of the other smaller states. That's where the big cities are, or the whatever that is, you know? If you look at the electoral vote.
Texas.
Texas. You look at electoral vote, some of those electoral vote map. Some of those states is red in the inside, completely blue in the outside.
Well, no, it's blue on the inside, right?
Yeah. No, you think it's blue, which is Republican. You think, oh, this is a what do you call a Republican state. It's not. It's a Democrat state. It just, they won the city. That's where everybody lives. That's how they won the elections. They won the cities, but they didn't win the state. But they won the cities and the population is there. So they eventually win the, is when you think, okay, everybody voted one side. Not really. Look at the electoral vote. It's just the way we are. That's our constitution. We have to respect that. That's why you have these issues like the votes, this, that. Gun control is the same thing. It falls. We have these issues, legislation, votes, and things like that. And so one thinks one way, the other one thinks the other one. I think they should not be automatic weapons in the hands of civilians.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. But we have a constitution to say we have the right to bear arms.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that, we remember if we had the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, those would not be the United States of America. It will be the United States of country X or region X, And so moving forward, maybe you can do that, make an amendment to the Constitution. But the automatic weapons should not be in the hands of civilians, because remember the riots in a long time ago in the 80s in New York and California, especially California. But you cannot prevent somebody to buy that unless they're registered that for a purpose. So you got that issue there. It's a constitutional issue. You want to lose that because the Constitution, and Supreme Court said, you got a Constitution. We're not going to change it. We know that. So so you got to offer something better to the people, something that pleases everybody. And the first thing they have to realize is what's the problem? The problem is not guns. Guns is the way people express themselves. The problem is guns and the people that should not have guns. And then that's a hard thing to do. But there are measures, and I think that's where gun control comes into play. I agree. I don't have a gun, but if I had one, I hope people check my background, makes me wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that is. And then maybe a year, maybe 2 years, because I'm on a registry now. I get a mail in the box or something that says, where is your gun? So I have to report it, because a lot of times I don't have to report where my gun is. So I can track that gun from where's it going. You got to have something to prevent as much as you can. And I think automatic weapons, you got to tackle that in a heartbeat. You have to tackle that. And then you have to tackle the root cause on the legal guns, where they're coming from. And you have the drugs. That's a different problem. So you can't tackle gun control without tackling a little bit of drugs, trust and demand and supply and the drugs. That a lot of stuff comes through there. Just you find in the markets or outside or attracts people. And the vendors are going to sell whatever people are buying.
Right.
Buying big guns. All of the narcos just buying stuff, and it's legal. They're going to sell it. I'm not going to buy something that people don't buy. I want to sell what people wants to buy. Yeah. So I think you got to tackle some of those things together. But we need some sort of legislation. We can't let it, because our culture, our generations are going worse and worse and worse. And thanks to media and Hollywood, it just gets worse. That stuff that you see through the eyes, they got to stop that stuff, more and more violent. That's what basically you're doing. Now, we criticize people when they call them inciting people, but Hollywood, they're showing all these movies. That's what the kids are watching these days. Where you think they have the idea of doing something? It's Facebook, Instagram, TV.
Yeah. Right. And
unless you as a parent, you're telling your son, I want you to be a violent guy, it's coming from somewhere, dude. I'll take some questions. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. And you make great observations, obviously. And one of the things that you said, and we brought this up earlier without conversation with Professor K, was obviously the Second Amendment, right, that protects that right to bear arms. One of the things that I mentioned was, this the Bill of Rights was written in the 1700s. So when we were coming, I was saying, I think part of the reasons why we're facing so much resistance is because people see some part of their identity, or have some part of their identity, on guns, and how more than violence, if at the time it was more of a way, like you said, to express themselves. It was a way, like it was the way that they organize themselves, their militia at the time, and they fought England and other nations who tried to take over territory and whatnot. So it was a way that they defended their territory, that they defended the culture that they had at the time, and in order to protect themselves from not previous from future obviously encounters with them. That's why it was protected. So what I was saying, what are we protecting ourselves from now? Again, this is something that was written over 100 years ago, and right now,
that is a very interesting question to answer. What are we protecting ourselves now? Being exposed in the Army for 32 years and being exposed to something that we see every day, but we avoid talking. United States is like a pizza of all the ingredients. It's got pepperoni, cheese, but it's not a lasagna. It's a pizza, different parts. Okay, so you mix these people together. You bring in all these cultures together. You bring all the issues together. And it just keeps going. The R word, for example, racist, it's going to be there. It's been there. It's grown out of proportion. It'll continue to grow different ways, but it's going to be there. You have to tackle that thing. You cannot address gun control without attacking that issue. In my experience, depending on who you ask, at what age, young people think a little bit different. Older thinks different. They grow throughout the ages, and they change too, for the bad side too. If depending on who you ask, what do you have a gun? They're going to protect themselves from the bad guy. Depending on who you ask, the bad guy is the black guy or the Hispanic, because we are violent. We have gangs. And we're related to drug. That is the stereotype. I'm not saying that's the truth, but that's the stereotype that the white American in many places has. Okay? It's, if you look at cities and things like that, some people are working, the camp, they mind their own business, they have their gun. And if you look at the classes in society, you have to go there, socioeconomics. We're poor because of obvious reasons. Doesn't mean we're bad. But then we fall into, or our generation falls into some things, and not everybody, just a few guys, and that's what they see. That's what TV portrays. Who is the bad guy? Oh, it's like a cuco en español. Oh, it's a dark guy. Oh, it's a Hispanic. They bring drugs. They bring these fights.
When in reality, that's a tribal thing. There's there's gangs on every side. There's gangs on every race.
That's that you gotta hit that mind, because it's the battle of the minds. And you gotta tackle so many different things like gun control at so many different levels, because otherwise we just put the band-aid or blame somebody else. We think it's just, no, it's in people's mind and culture, and then they're gonna play the Constitution just like Norma was saying. They will do that, but then among those people you have the really bad people that are using it because of hate or other things. You got all these things working together. It's just so hard to fix. But people think like that. The same way you think one way, they think the other way too.
Yeah. There's on the other side. And when you say that, one of the things that we also discuss is that a lot of this, also looking historically, in the in the way that people were using guns back when this amendment was put in place was to first of all, and I have zero knowledge about guns, but Professor K was describing how they were like a single shot pistol, and they were not that semi-automatic rifles that we're seeing that are being used right now. So obviously that's a completely different topic, and again, I have zero knowledge about that. But it came from fear. Like, it was fear. Like, this is all based on fear, and until we can address that, but how do we bridge that? Because I mean, just like you said at the beginning, you have the left, we have the right, and at the end of the day, common people like you and I are like, okay, so what are we doing? And because nobody's really doing anything, then we're pushing, the other side is pulling, and at the end of the day, we're stuck here with more and more of these cases that again are increasing.
We're not going anywhere. You're right. We're not going anywhere. Regardless of all these other root causes or issues, we're really not going anywhere. We got to fix that. The services, when I say the services, is the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, the Navy, Marines with the Navy, Coast Guard is also out there. They have an interesting issue or not issue or problem. It's a problem set. You hire, you enlist a lot of people that come from many different backgrounds. Then you put them all together and you expect them to work as a team. That takes years in the company. It ain't just training. It
gets done, correct?
Huh?
It gets done, but it gets done, and it gets done very well, right?
You got to look at the whole enchilada, meaning that you're exactly right. We got a program. We have our set of instructions. We have our values. You're dealing with all this problem. People bringing in young people, just like, it's different. It's Hispanic. This is African American. This is white American. This is Chinese or Italian, European, or African, because you got people like that. You get all this dilemma. You got to bring this together. And sooner or later, some change, like I did. Some say, hey, I got something higher. It's a Constitution of the United States. I love what I'm doing. I love my country. I'm going to devote myself to this. So I'm rendering basically my rights or my privileges to this thing called the United States Army. So I'm trusting my leadership. So I become in a family with them, and they got all this policies, regulations, which is the legislation or the laws, but you also have leadership, very strong leadership. If you don't do something, you're going to get whacked, So I'm not saying everything has to become that, but unless they find, like you're saying, a way of bringing everybody together, legislation, and follow with strong law control legislation, nothing is going to happen. It'll continue.
Huh? Sorry to interrupt you, right there, but you just hit something when you say it comes, or in order for to make and to merge, all the backgrounds, all the different cultures, all the ideologies, everything, and make it work on something such as something that is so rigid as the Army in all of its branches and everything. There has to be some accountability that is in place, and that it gets enforced by leadership. Is that where we're lacking? Is that what we've been lacking all these decades? That we just
a lot of that completely. And for me, that's towards the end. The first thing we're lacking, that I was talking about briefly a little bit at the beginning when I say training, is education. You gotta educate people. We think you don't know. You gotta educate people in elementary, middle school, high school, colleges. You gotta educate people. You gotta educate people to the TV. Education means also, I'm not gonna expose you to the crap and trash that is out there. We can't do that because we got Hollywood, with all these things, and then you got this guys like me, homeboys, is cool. I'm in the streets. I'm selling drugs. I got money. Got the gun. I'm the guy. I get the best girl. I mean, it's like a Cinderella story, but it's a violent story. So we're failing to educate guys The man in the house is not, because it's just too much. So you're battling all that. But at the end, it's like you're saying, is I'm trying to fix it over here in the legislation. But unless you have that type of control, education, not reprisals, but if something doesn't happen, how don't, what is my arm to really, where's my issue? Is it the guns, or is it the people, or is it what they know? So what is the issue at hand? I know the gun is an expression, but how do I tackle a mind? I cannot tackle a mind unless I educate that mind. And if that mind goes out of control and we identify that mind, then we got to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I like to talk solutions, And you mentioned the pen. You said they're doing it the wrong way, and I'm assuming you implied executive orders, right?
Yeah.
Which is what both parties come and they do, and they try to temporarily do their own thing. But do they have?
When they use unilateral, that's when it's bad, I think. But go ahead.
Is there any way to force that to happen, to where they can force the senators and to tackle that one issue and focus on that one issue until something gets legislative? Or am I just being dumb?
No, but you're right on the money, I think. Yeah, from my experience and from what I know and seen going through struggles in life, because you got the three powers, the executive orders, the legislations, and then you have the Capitol building, our senators and our representatives, our government. Really, that's what the government is, in the Capitol building, So those three there's checks and balances. And so the executive order says, this is not happening, we're going to do it. That's where it should start. At that level, the presidency, working with Congress, and the states, the governors, local states. The local states governors, they don't need to wait for the presidency. They can say, we got a problem with gun control. I'm going to tackle this thing. I got a problem with illegal immigration. Let me tackle this thing. But then the money, all that stuff. The legislation a lot of times comes into place when I think that the cases start building up, or you have issues, or we're breaking the Constitution, and they have to come in and step into the play. But in our system, they can't just walk in and just, we have a strong background. If you remember the 60s and 70s with racism, and that's when really they had to step in, but the matter was done orderly. The courts, when I'm talking about the courts, because a lot of the courts in the South were really not just defending their own interests. So you got to be careful, because the courts, you got the liberals and you got the Republicans. So you got the same thing. And they say, oh, wait a minute. We have to be careful. We don't go too much to the left or too much to the right. We need to be where we're protecting our people. We're protecting them as a whole. And in gun control, yes, it's one of those things. So they have a big responsibility too. But I forget what they call the legislations and the people that advocates for these changes, it's got a political term. They're all there in DC, advocating. We need gun control, like you guys. We need part of gun control and advocate for these things and collect information, present to the public, and things like that. And so those are the political parties and the people raising the type of issues and questions through the help with the media in this case, and trying to force the government to make actions across the board. The United States, unlike other countries, okay, it's the best country in the world. I honestly believe in that. But you don't have this problem in other countries, because it's more like a dictatorship or a king. It's like, there's no guns today in my country, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, that's how Australia did it, right? I mean, they just said, I don't know, it was it. We're no more guns, and
that was it.
And they took them all away. Yeah. That was.
But that's so we don't have that lifestyle, but we have a different lifestyle. So this is what our lifestyle brings. We got some of these issues that encountering right now, and they're very hard. We're trying to manage them through legislation. I think it's the right way of doing it, education and accountability. But it's a tough one, like the other one. How are you going to do that when you have this beautiful amendment and, right to bear arms, and things like that? How are you going to tackle that monster? Gun control is the only way.
Do you know what did he sign? What did President Biden sign? I don't know. I don't know anything about. I know I only heard the surface was what he signed an executive order, something about gun control, but I didn't know. I don't know exactly what.
I don't know what he said. Maybe it was background checks, or because they always talk about background checks or databases or semi-automatic weapons and things like that, which is a little bit hard to tackle. What if I have, for example, a medical history with something, right? And I have issues with the law. Does that prevent me from buying a weapon? And who are we in the government to tell Jorge that I cannot buy a weapon because I had 3 tickets and I had a mental, it's so hard to get everybody to agree to say, no, you can't do that because this side is going to complain. That's unconstitutional. You attack one group, you didn't attack the other one. This is not the issue. The issue is this one. And then the evidence, how we play it on the media, this, all the issue with gun control is because it's white supremacy. There's an example. No, it's not. So you have to be careful with all these other weird things that the same thing that we have to convince the other side, in my opinion. And I'm advocating for the Hispanics, African Americans, all the other classes, that we're not the bad guy on the movie.
Yeah.
The movie is the bad guy,
Yeah.
Anybody can pull the trigger. So it's not linked to a class or race or religious group and things like that. But all those things play into gun control right now at the political level. And it's just so hard to separate those things and analyze it properly and say, boom, because they might have a strong root cause, but it may be impossible to control it. But there's things that we can do, we're not doing, that I think we could do to alleviate the problem. For me, it's automatic weapons, background checks, accountability. And if I'm a guy with the history, get ready. You're not getting one. We go to courts.
But I think you're not the only one. I think most of Americans agree with all those things that you're just saying, but yet they're not put on the table in Congress or in the Senate. And do you know why do you think that is? Why?
Politics, the votes, the power. It's the one side goes against that or in favor, then I'm going to have one side good, but I'm going to make Matt the other side. And politicians want all the votes. So I got to make you happy. I got to make the other side happy. But once I take a side, it ain't coming back. Now you got presidents have done that, and they lose elections. Because once you make a hard cut in one way, that step ain't coming back. You got to stick to your guns. But that doesn't make them better than other people either. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to gun control and some of the decisions we have, you have to make a call. You're going to have to really
define
answer.
yourself.
Thank you.
And just so I can get your side, because we spoke with Professor K a lot about the NRA. Where are you? Where are you standing on the NRA? Because I think if anyone, I think they have a huge influences when it comes to putting those things on the table, and you know which way they go. But what's your opinion on them?
I think they have too much influence on the process, and even in the courts. Okay, now who did this prudencia in some other legal terms, right? In the courts. Once that I make a decision on something, that becomes the law. That's what is jurisprudencia, right? And all these things. I go to court because I had a speeding ticket, it's an example. And the law says on this state that I was doing 50 miles over the speed limit, so therefore you're going to be 6 months in jail, blah, 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 blah. The window, whatever that is. But I cannot take the next guy and let him go for free.
Uh-huh.
I already established the precedent that this is the punishment for that guy. I'm trying to explain something very simple, but it has major implications in the system, the legal system. So that's the same thing with gun control, the issues when we bring gun to the courts, and the courts already rule that this is a violation of the Second Amendment. That's an example of preventing sending guns to these people. And so the same case goes back again to the courts from different states. They're going to say the NRA is simple. They got a huge whole bunch of lawyers been doing this for years. It's a simple case. It doesn't last more than 2 days in courts because everybody knows how the court is going to rule. But it doesn't mean we give up. You got to hit him hard. And you got to play, and you got to show that the Constitution maybe needs to change. The amendment needs to be relooked and remodified. And when we make these decisions back then, we were different United States of America. Now we are different right now. And it's time to change, make that change. In the United States, that takes a long time. In other countries, not.
Do you think do you think, so that you can continue that, do you think that's because our privilege? And when I say our, I mean not as in yours and mine specifically, but as society, where we just question and say, no, so-and-so is protected by so-and-so. This is my right. This is my thing. It works for me. It suits me well. Why should it change it? It doesn't matter what it's doing, what are the ramifications on other groups and other people, but again, it suits me well. Why would I change it? Do you think that's part of what you're saying?
Absolutely right. It's my liberty to exercise that liberty as an American citizen. It's not impacting me, therefore, hence, why should I be against that thing? Many people think like that, okay? Because it is my right. And when you look at it, there's I guess there's good and whatever, maybe not good in some things or bad, but I looked at it from a different perspective, and not at gun control only, at being an American from other countries, being overseas for so many times. So I asked myself the question when I was in places like South Korea, Europe, Germany, Italy, what makes people leave their country and come to the United States when things are going okay in their country? Just can't understand it. And it's a set of liberty. There's nothing like the United States of America in the world. There's really nothing. And so you don't live, I mean, you can live so beautiful in some of these countries, but many of these guys, they want to come and live in the United States. What triggers them to come over here? And it's all these liberties, the chance to really, there's no other country that you can come in as a first generation immigrant, and maybe in 5 years you could be a rich man if you work hard, do things properly.
Mm-hmm.
People have done it a lot, and the freedom of religion is big, huge. We don't see that because we live in freedom of religion. But if you're in a different country and you want to exercise religion, it's a little bit difficult in some of these other countries. And so that, where I live, I choose where I live, I choose who to marry, I choose what to do in life. Legal is going to protect the Constitution. I'm going to find. And then you find a melting pot like the United States that we're supposed to be Americans, but we have the Bronx, full of Puerto Rican. We got Texas full of Mexican. When I say exercise the Mexican culture, we got Florida with exercise the Cuban Hispanic culture, and Orlando the same thing. California the same thing. There's no other country in the world that allows you to do that. And we speak like so many different languages in the United States. Maybe we speak more than the rest of the world. We don't. But I can tell you there's all the languages probably in the world, they're in the United States because people come to the United States. So you mix all that stuff together, and now gun control, it's just so hard. You got to educate people. How do you make them become American, and not to think with this generation after World War II, a little bit after World War II, that's my generation, the baby boomers, the generations that came after, that I have the right to bear arms just because it states in the Constitution. I wanted to change this. I have the right to bear arms if I want to bear arms when it's necessary to bear arms. But a weapon is not designed for me to kill my neighbor. How do I get that? Regardless of the drug problem, the poverty, the issues that we have in our societies, racism, and in the mix of cultures that we have, and the struggles that we have, things like that, which impacts 100% gun control. The perceptions that we have of people and things like that. That's what you're dealing with. I mean, gun control happens to be that thing that brings that to light, many different things like the border issues, the drug issues, bring all these other issues that we have in our culture to light. But how do we control that? I mean, I have no idea other than saying, hey, there will be no more guns in here. And that's not
going to happen, not in this lifetime.
Like,
It's been an hour, man, and it went by fast, just like the previous hours.
It felt like 20 minutes.
I'm gonna bring my equipment to Colorado if you don't mind. That way we can sit down together and take that wild forest from your background. Because you got birds, man. I think I heard a monkey back there. Florida doesn't have monkeys. I don't understand it. But I also want to talk to you about more military stuff too, because I'm real interested on this decision about Afghanistan and pulling the troops, and I really want to dive into that with you, because you actually worked out. You not there? Did you serve in Afghanistan or?
Didn't want to either.
But you served in the Middle East, correct? You did serve somewhere out there. Okay.
There have been 2 other places. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're gonna actually sit down and talk about that and maybe hit this issue a little bit more. But I don't know if Norma has anything else. But I appreciate it, and yeah.
Well, she has some good questions.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it was
Professor K. She's smart.
No, I just want to thank you. I mean, very insightful. Gosh, this 2 hours, it's been 2 hours, and I'm just like more and more questions because it is so interesting and so fascinating. And it's just, I'm so grateful that you kept bringing up this question, not this question, but you kept bringing up education. I think one of the things that, in my case, I can say I'm very uneducated on a lot of things, and I think that has been my biggest realization. First of all, understanding that I am very that I'm unaware about a lot of things, and that I think if people took more time to really understand that how uneducated we are on so many of these things, because it's easy for us to come and say, well, yeah, gun control, oh well, no, don't come and mess up with my guns and whatever, and we just leave it there, and we don't take the time to, again, just because it's not affecting us, then we don't take the time to really ponder on those things and investigate and educate ourselves and question and wait, is this even right? Hold on, where am I getting this from? We're going to continue this vicious cycle that, unfortunately, that just like we said earlier, we're not moving in any direction. We're stuck. It's just like, again, that vicious cycle of, and we can say leadership, we can say a lot of these things, but one of the things that I always say is everything starts at home, because from here, I think one of the biggest problems is that we're trying to address it at a national level, the United States. And then, no, it's not the United States, it's the state of Utah, the state of Florida, the state of Texas. And then, no, it's the county, but we never look inwards. No, it's at home. What is happening in our homes with our kids? Are we having conversations with our kids about, even, violence, just like you said, unless you're constantly educating your kids in that way and in that manner, where are they getting this from? And how are we as parents preventing, not necessarily preventing them from seeing these things, because eventually at some point they're going to be exposed to these things, but rather, okay, how are we educating them so that they can make choices, educated choices, that they question these things, that they come to you for answers rather than trying to get answers from people out there that who knows what they know, what they see, what their environment is. So thank you for, I noticed you kept bringing that up, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Super
We got-
insightful, super insightful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Well, Tio, thank you. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. I appreciate you doing this on such a short notice.
Yes.
And
We'll see you
yeah,
soon. We can.
anytime. You'll be back in here for sure. I'm a dummy, so I gotta smart people around me so we
Oh, you
can
have it soon.
yeah,
Forget.
move
Okay.
forward.
Well, thank you, and saludos a todos.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay, so
Okay, mi amor, 2 hours. 2
that was
hours.
you, Jorge. That went like 20 minutes. That felt like 20 minutes to me.
Yeah, it sure did.
Um,
Yeah, no,
but
both
we-
conversations were awesome, and it's just I gotta go. I'm just gonna put my last stand. You saw it. I mean, and this is pretty much America on both sides. They both agree, and I don't think this has been repeated before. They both agree on those basic common sense things, and we just have to figure out and use our vote to get us to put those things in the table and try to make a change. But I can promise you something. I mean, the definition of craziness if doing the same thing over and over and expecting something different, and doing nothing is not gonna solve anything. They're gonna keep coming. And we have kids. We have 3 little ones that we shouldn't be scared of sending them to school and you know hoping that somebody doesn't go in and shoot. And now it's everywhere. I mean, concerts, clubs in Florida. You had that shooting at the dance club. I mean, you can't go anywhere without
our market.
supermarkets. Now even at your job at the FedEx facility. I mean, he got fired and 8 people paid with their lives. And I mean, you literally can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere without having that fear. And we have to eliminate it and do something about it for sure. But say what you gotta say so we can go. Bye. We gotta go.
Don't rush me.
Oh, sorry. Take your time. It's only been 2 hours.
No, well, I just wanted to again say thank you for you guys for staying this long with us. It's been probably our longest podcast, but I mean, obviously we had the guests and those 2 hours went super quick. So thank you, Tio Jorge, Professor K. And I think just like Eddie said, piggybacking from that, there's gotta be some change. Like, and we cannot get 20 more years of this and then just say, well, it's again pulling, pushing type of situation, but there's gonna be some type of compromise, and there's gonna be also some type of empathy and respect for those who have lost their lives. I mean, because then at this point, that number can just keep climbing, and we can just say, well, it is unfortunate, which it is. We can say, well, there was mental issues involving some of them or most of them or all of them, which that's probably true. We can say all these things. We can be saying all these things, but I've been hearing this for years. I've been hearing this for years, and yet these cases are not ceasing. They are, again,
Oh,
what has happened in these weeks is it should be alarming to say the least. So again, also to go back to what Jorge said, let's start at home, like really bringing awareness and with our little ones with us, because this is probably not going to be an easy, short process, but I wouldn't want, our kids to be debating over this same issue 20 years from now. Like that's just ridiculous. And there's got to be something that we can do. So, but anyway, hit us up, send us your thoughts, your comments, send us an email, whatever you feel. We'll be happy to present them, to read them here. Normayeddie at lapareja.anormal.com. We'll put it there. I know it probably doesn't really sound like
English, that's just for bilinguals. If you only speak English, we're gonna put it down on the link. And
yes,
like we said on the last episode, we're gonna separate them. We're gonna that way you're expecting.
Yeah, we're probably going to do a part
or
1, part 2.
Spanish. No, we're not doing part 1, part 2 on this. No, we're just gonna.
Oh, you're talking about the info, the email. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about our podcast. We're
yes. We're also working on that.
We're working on separating them and giving English only, Spanish only. That way, we can have an easier email. No, way more than that, obviously. That way you're not confused and having to go through what's English, what's Spanish, things like that. But yeah, I love you guys.
See you again.
And we'll obviously we'll put pieces out too once I get a little time. We'll put pieces out and maybe upload the interview separately, things like that. But no, today you're gonna get the whole thing, and yeah, it's interesting. So I know you went through it. You probably then nobody's listening by now. Love you guys.
Nobody's listening, but whoever's listening, bye.
I love you. Bye.